They say the past doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. But what no one ever warns you about is how trauma mutates, how it slithers into the cracks of your life even when you swear you've sealed every door behind you. I was only 15 when I escaped. A baby in one arm, bruises still fresh, and nothing in my pocket but a bus ticket and my mother's final whispered words, "Run." I ran. I built a life, a quiet life. I worked until my hands were cracked and my bones ached, but I gave my son Ethan everything I never had: stability, education, love. I watched him grow into a man with gentle hands and a brilliant mind, a college graduate, an engineer, a father of two. And I let myself believe it had all been worth it. That love had rewritten the curse, that the monster from my past hadn't left a stain on my bloodline. But then came the phone call from Ethan's wife. Her voice was shaking. Her words were slow, like she was afraid they'd shatter me. "Mrs. Smith, I'm sorry to call you like this, but Ethan, he's not who you think he is. I had to leave with the kids. I didn't know where else to go." That was the day my past came knocking, only this time it wasn't from behind me. It had grown up in my home. It bore my last name. My name is Jessica Smith. I'm 73 years old. And this is the story I swore I'd never tell. The story of how I escaped hell once, only to see it return through my own flesh and blood. I remember the smell of cinnamon toast. It was the first thing I learned to make when we arrived in Washington. Cheap white bread margarine from a dented tin and a sprinkle of sugar and spice. I made it every morning because it was sweet, it was warm, and it made Charles smile. That smile, I built my life around it. The year was 1967. I was 16, living in a boarding house on the edge of a city I didn't know. With a child I had no idea how to raise. I had one bag of clothes, a heart full of scars, and the kind of exhaustion that doesn't sleep even when your eyes are closed. But I was free. No more broken door locks, no more footsteps in the dark, no more pretending not to bleed. Just me and Charles. I scrubbed floors, served meals, ironed shirts until the steam burned my fingers. I worked from dawn to dusk, my back always aching, but I did it gladly. Because every time I returned to our little corner room and saw Charles sleeping in that borrowed crib, cheeks red from the heat, lashes curled like feathers, I knew it was all worth it. He had no idea, no clue that his life had started in a nightmare, that his father was not a man but a shadow, a sickness, a secret. Charles had soft eyes green like the man I never spoke of. But I told myself it didn't matter. Eyes didn't carry sin, souls did, and his was untouched, untainted. When he learned to walk, I wept into my apron in the kitchen. When he said his first word, Mama, I locked myself in the pantry and cried until my nose bled. I was terrified I'd ruin him, because love, real love, it didn't come naturally to me, not after what I'd been through. I had to learn it, stitch by stitch, breath by breath. There were nights I'd watch him sleep and whisper promises over his little body. You'll never be afraid in your own home. You'll never beg anyone to believe you. You'll never be mine the way I was his. Those promises were my gospel. Mrs. Martha, the woman who ran the boarding house, was the first person to tell me I was doing a good job. It was a Wednesday. I remember because the kitchen had just finished lunch service and I was elbow deep in dishwater. Charles was sitting on a pile of rags beside me, humming nonsense and chewing the ear off a cloth bunny. You know, Mrs. Martha said, sipping her sweet tea with that southern drawl, I've seen a lot of girls come through here. Some fold after a week, but you got iron in your spine, girl. That baby's lucky. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever called me strong before. Not like that. That night, I wrote it down in my notebook. Iron in my spine. He's lucky. Maybe I'm not broken. It became a ritual, writing one line a night after Charles went to bed, my own kind of therapy. Because back then, nobody offered therapy to girls like me. You either carried it or it crushed you. By the time Charles turned 5, he was already reading. Not full sentences, but street signs, cereal boxes, labels on the canned food. I saved up to buy him secondhand books from the church sale, tattered picture books, missing pages, golden spines cracked, but to him they were treasures. He used to sit on the floor and read aloud, making up stories to go with the pictures. Dragons in laundry baskets, spaceships made from saucepans. I laughed more in those years than I ever thought possible. I also learned how to be invisible. There's a kind of quiet skill to surviving when you're a single mother in a place that doesn't know your name. You don't make noise. You don't ask questions. You say thank you too often and never complain. But you watch. You watch everyone. You memorize exits. You never leave your child alone with a man, not even for a second. There was a boarder once, a traveling salesman with whiskey breath and eyes that lingered. He tried to give Charles a coin just because. I told Mrs. Martha. She sent him packing the next morning. No questions asked. That's why I loved her. That winter was rough. Charles got sick, just a cough at first, then fever. I didn't have enough money for the doctor, but Mrs. Martha paid out of her own pocket. She even made soup, the good kind with real chicken. I lost a baby once, she told me, setting the bowl on our nightstand. 15 hours old, never cried. You don't ever forget something like that. That's why I keep this place running, for girls like you, for second chances. Second chances. I held onto those words like a raft. I watched Charles get better slowly. He never knew how close he came to slipping through my fingers. I stayed up every night with a cool cloth on his forehead, singing lullabies I half remembered from my own mother. Funny how the same woman who couldn't protect me had still managed to leave behind songs that healed. When Charles was 6, a man moved into the boarding house who changed everything. Not in the way you think, not like the monsters of my past. His name was Robert Whitaker. Mr. Robert. Gray-haired, quiet, always wore a vest even in the heat. Said very little except to Charles. He adored him, brought him little toys from the 5 and dime, read to him in the evenings, once even built him a birdhouse out of old scrapwood. I kept my distance at first. Trust for me was something long dead, buried deep. But Mr. Robert never crossed a line, never asked personal questions, never invaded our space, and slowly I softened. One afternoon, Charles tripped in the hallway and split his chin. It wasn't deep, but it bled like the devil. I panicked, was shaking so hard I could barely think. Mr. Robert stepped in calm as anything, cleaned the wound, applied a bandage, told Charles he looked like a pirate now. That night over tea, he said quietly, "You've done well by him. That boy, he's got light in him." I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I just nodded and said thank you. By the time Charles turned 9, Mr. Robert had become part of our world. Not a replacement for anything, just a pillar, a safe one. He taught Charles how to fish, how to whittle a stick, how to tie a tie, all the things I couldn't teach. I watched them from the kitchen window once, Charles grinning, Mr. Robert, pointing at something in the grass, and for a moment I let myself believe we were a normal family. No ghosts, no blood, no shadows. Just a tired woman, her golden boy, and a kind old man with time to give. But the past? It has roots. And even when you chop the tree down, the roots stay, twisting under the surface, waiting for the right season. It would be years before I saw the first sprout, before I'd learned that the love I gave wasn't enough to keep the past from mutating. But for now, we were safe, and that was more than I'd ever had. They say adolescence is when boys grow into men, but I've learned that sometimes it's when ghosts grow teeth. Charles turned 12 in the spring of 1974. He'd gotten tall, almost too tall for his pants' arms, swinging like he hadn't yet figured out what to do with them. His voice squeaked when he laughed, and his mood started shifting like the weather. One day he'd hug me so tight I thought he'd never let go. The next, he'd barely grunt in response when I asked about his day. Just tired, he'd mumble, "It's fine." I knew boys could be like that. Hormones, boundaries, growing pains. That's what all the mothers in the neighborhood said. But deep down, something in my gut whispered, "Pay attention." The first time I saw it, I told myself it wasn't real. We were in the kitchen. I had just come home from the diner, tired and sore. Charles was sitting at the table eating cereal for dinner again. I noticed the bowl had spilled a little on the table. Just a splash of milk. "Can you wipe that up, baby?" I asked gently. He didn't even look at me, just grabbed a napkin and shoved it across the surface with his knuckles hard and fast. "Is that how we treat things now?" I joked, trying to lighten the mood. He didn't laugh, just stared at the milk-soaked napkin, hands clenched. Then he said, low and sharp, "Why don't you clean it if it bothers you so much?" The silence after that felt like a thunderclap. I didn't say anything, just took the napkin and wiped the table. He didn't apologize. He just went back to eating, eyes fixed on the bowl like it had done something wrong. That night, I sat in the bathroom with the water running, my hands shaking. It wasn't what he said. It was the way he said it. Cold, detached, familiar. But I pushed it away, told myself he was tired, that I was overreacting, that I was projecting. We all see ghosts when we're scared enough. Charles started spending more time in his room. The door was usually shut. I'd knock and hear a rustle, then footsteps. Then the door opening just wide enough for his face. "Dinner's ready," I'd say. "I'm not hungry." Sometimes he'd eat, sometimes he wouldn't. Sometimes I'd find food stuffed into napkins hidden under the bed. Once I found a cracked plate in the trash can buried under layers of newspapers. When I asked about it, he just shrugged. It slipped. But the truth felt heavier than ceramic. I talked to Mr. Robert. He was older now, slower, but his mind was sharp as ever. He listened as I poured out my fears in the garden one afternoon. Maybe it's just a phase, I whispered. Maybe I'm too on edge. I don't want to be one of those mothers who sees monsters in every corner. Mr. Robert lit his pipe, looked at the blooming azaleas. Or maybe he said slowly, "You're one of the few who knows what a monster really looks like." That silenced me. I didn't sleep that night. Then came the incident at school. The principal called on a rainy Tuesday. "I hate to bother you, Mrs. Smith," she began, "but there was an altercation today." Charles punched another student. Punched? Yes, over a pencil apparently. I showed up to the office soaking wet, holding a tissue in one hand and my purse in the other. Charles was sitting in the hallway, arms crossed, one knee bouncing. When he saw me, he looked away. The other boy had a split lip. Charles had a bruise forming on his cheekbone. The principal explained that Charles had overreacted, that the other student had made a joke and Charles had lost control. I apologized profusely, promised it wouldn't happen again, took Charles home in silence. Halfway up the stairs to our apartment, I stopped, turned to him. "Why, Charles?" He didn't answer. "Talk to me, please. What happened?" His jaw clenched. His voice dropped. He touched my book bag. That's all he said. That night, I sat in my room, hands buried in the folds of the comforter, thinking about Tony. Tony used to say the same thing, that people touched what didn't belong to them, that he had to teach them a lesson. That control was the only thing that mattered. I shook the thought away. Charles wasn't Tony. He couldn't be. I had raised him with love, with safety, with space to feel things. But trauma doesn't always shout. Sometimes it seeps. When Charles was 13, he started locking his door. Not just at night, but in the middle of the day. I'd knock and hear the deadbolt click. "I'm studying," he'd say. Once I asked for my sewing kit that he had borrowed. "I'll bring it out," he answered through the door. It never came. I started finding scratches on the furniture, knife marks in the wood of the dining table, a broken mirror behind the bathroom door. When I asked, Charles would shrug. "I don't know, must have fallen." And every time my stomach would drop. It wasn't the lying that scared me, it was the calm, the total lack of remorse. And the silence that followed, the long, endless silence of a child pulling away not because he was growing up, but because something darker was taking root. One afternoon, I found him standing in the backyard staring at the garden. "Something wrong with the flowers?" I asked gently. He didn't look at me, just tilted his head, eyes narrowing at a bee hovering over a daffodil. "Why do things die so easily?" he asked. I blinked. "What do you mean?" He turned to me. There was a strange gleam in his eyes, cold, empty. I mean, if someone stepped on that bee right now, would it even matter? I felt something shiver down my spine. Not fear, not exactly. More like recognition. A long-buried note in a familiar tune. I reached out, touched his shoulder. It would matter to the bee. He stared at me for a moment, then smiled. A small, crooked smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe," he said, and walked away. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute. I sat on the couch with my journal in my lap, trying to find the words. I love my son. I love him with everything I have, but something is happening, something I don't understand. He's changing and I don't know if it's just hormones or something deeper. I'm scared. I'm so scared. I shut the journal, hid it under the floorboard where I kept the rest of my secrets. Then I prayed. For the first time in years, I truly prayed. Not for strength, not for clarity, just for a second chance again. I had escaped once. Could I escape again? If the threat came from my own child, I didn't know. But I would find out. Because the next part of my story is when everything unraveled. There's always a moment when the truth stops whispering and starts screaming. For me, it happened on a Tuesday. Charles was 15, tall, broad-shouldered, handsome in that quiet, unsettling way. The girls at church whispered about him. Teachers praised his intelligence. Even strangers smiled at his politeness. But I knew better. At home, the walls had grown thinner, the silences longer, the air thicker. He barely spoke to me unless I asked a direct question, and even then his answers were sharp-clipped, as though I'd interrupted something important. Something I wasn't allowed to know about. I once walked into his room without knocking my mistake. He was sitting at his desk, reading something on a folded piece of paper. He snatched it away the moment he saw me. "Don't come in here uninvited," he said. His voice wasn't angry, it was controlled, like a threat with a silk glove. "I'm sorry," I said. "I was just bringing your laundry." He didn't respond, just stood up and closed the door behind me, quietly, purposefully. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the pie I'd made his favorite peach and brown sugar and realized he hadn't thanked me for anything in months. Then came the theft. Mrs. Martha had passed away by then, and the boarding house had long been converted into apartments. I worked part-time at the local library and did sewing jobs on the side. It was enough to keep the lights on and food on the table. I'd been saving for months to buy Charles a car for his 16th birthday. Not a fancy one, just something safe and sturdy. I kept the money in a lockbox under my bed, hidden beneath a stack of quilted blankets. One morning, I opened the box and found half the cash gone. Gone. I tore the apartment apart. Every drawer, every coat pocket, every book, nothing. When Charles came home, I asked him straight. He didn't blink. Why would I take your money? I didn't say you did, I replied carefully. You didn't have to, he said, and then he walked away. That night, I didn't sleep. Again, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I should call the police. But what would I say that my own son, my boy, had stolen from me? And even if he had, what then? What justice did the world offer a mother with no proof and a gut full of dread? A week later, I found the missing cash, folded neatly in the glove compartment of a second-hand motorbike parked 2 blocks away. It wasn't the money that gutted me, it was the receipt I found beneath it. Signed in Charles's name. I waited for him to come home. When he walked through the door, I held up the slip. He looked at it, then at me, then shrugged. It's mine now, he said. Charles, you stole from me. You lied. No, he said calmly. I took what you were already planning to give. What difference does it make? The air left my lungs. That's not how this works, I whispered. He tilted his head, smiled faintly. It's how it works for me. And just like that, I saw it. The monster. Not the one I had escaped. Not his face, not his hands, but his logic, his detachment, the chilling belief that the world owed him something and that if it didn't comply, he had the right to take it. I had given birth to him. I had fed him, clothed him, bled for him. And yet here he was, unmoved, unapologetic, unreachable. I told him to return the bike. He refused. I told him to leave the table. He laughed. I slapped him. It was the first time, and the last. He didn't hit me back. He didn't flinch. He just stared at me, hand pressed lightly to his cheek. Don't do that again, he said. There was no anger in his voice. Only warning. That night, I cried harder than I did the day I left Tony. Because with Tony, I had an escape. But from your own child, where do you run? The next few months blurred into survival. I set boundaries, tried curfews, therapy, church. Nothing stuck. Charles became more secretive, more volatile. He'd disappear for hours, come home with new clothes I didn't buy, cigarette burns on his jacket, knuckles bruised. He started calling me Jessica, not Mom, not Ma, just Jessica. When I asked why, he shrugged. It's your name, isn't it? Once he looked me in the eyes and said I didn't ask to be born, and it cut deeper than any slap. But the moment the line he truly crossed came one evening in late October. I had started volunteering at a shelter downtown, just 2 nights a week. It was a place for women like I once was, hurt, lost, rebuilding. One of them, a girl named Alina, was sweet and shy, barely 19, big brown eyes and a stitched-up lip from a boyfriend who loved her too much. One night I brought her home, just for a few hours. The shelter was overcrowded and the storm was fierce. I couldn't leave her there. She sat on the couch, knees tucked under her chin, sipping tea. Charles came in, saw her and froze. Then smiled. Not a kind smile. A knowing smile. He walked up to her, offered his hand. I'm Charles, he said smoothly. Welcome. I watched her flinch, just a little, but I saw it. Don't mind him, I said gently. He's just getting home from school. Alina stayed 2 hours. We played cards, talked about books. She laughed a little. When she left, she thanked me, then hesitated. He's charming, she said carefully. I nodded. Yes, he can be. Then she added, but something about him feels familiar. That word, familiar. I didn't ask more. But that night, I checked Charles's room after he went to bed. I don't know what I was looking for. Evidence, proof. I found a notebook under his mattress. Inside page after page of angry writing, not poems, not stories, just rants. About control, weakness, power, women. They say they want nice guys, but they choose the ones who hit them. They cry when you leave, but never when you stay. They deserve it. I dropped the book. Left the room. Threw up in the sink. That was the night I knew I had failed. Not because I hadn't tried, but because something inside Charles had twisted. Something I couldn't undo. And the scariest part, he knew it. He liked it. The next morning, I told him I needed space, that I wanted him to stay with his aunt in Oregon for the summer. He stared at me for a long time, then said, "You're afraid of me." I didn't answer. Because yes, I was, not for my life, but for my soul. Because every time I looked at him now, I saw Tony. Not in face, not in body, but in belief. The belief that the world owed him control. That pain was a currency, and that I, the woman who gave him life, was now in his way. When Charles turned 21, he changed his name. Just like that, no ceremony, no announcement. I opened the mailbox one afternoon and found a return envelope addressed to Ethan Smith. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But later that week, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Mom, it's Ethan now. Just letting you know before things get official. No, I love you. No, hope you're well. Just a transaction." I stared at that message for hours. The name Ethan meant nothing to me. It wasn't a nickname from childhood. It wasn't a family name. It was Kate, a choice, a severance. He didn't want to be Charles anymore. He didn't want to be anything I made him. I typed a reply, deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. In the end, I sent only 2 words, "I see." That was the last message we exchanged for almost 2 years. In that time, I breathed again. I joined a quilting circle, read library books every Thursday, helped out at the shelter, watched the sunrise without wondering if I'd find something broken in the kitchen. But no peace lasts forever. One day I was slicing apples in the kitchen when the landline rang. I almost didn't pick up. "Mrs. Smith," the voice asked, soft and trembling. "Yes, speaking. It's Dana, Ethan's wife." I froze. "I hope this isn't a bad time," she said quickly. I'm sorry to call. I didn't know who else to reach out to." "What's wrong?" Silence. Then the words came like a faucet turned on too fast. He hasn't hit me. Not exactly, but I'm scared. And the kids, they're scared. He yells. He throws things. He watches me. Like I'm a pet he doesn't like anymore. My heart sank. I wanted to deny it. Tell her she was imagining things. That she was wrong. That I had been wrong. But I couldn't. Not after the notebook. Not after the dead stare he gave me that night. "Where are you now?" I asked. "At a hotel. I took the kids just for the night." I closed my eyes. My hands were trembling. "Stay there," I said. "I'm coming." Dana looked younger than I remembered. Small. Pale. Her hand shook as she handed me her daughter, a chubby-cheeked 2-year-old named Ivy. There were marks on her arms, faded bruises. Explanations that didn't match. "He says it's stress," she whispered. "That I'm too emotional. That the kids are soft because of me. He tells me I should be grateful he works so hard. That I wouldn't last a week without him." My teeth clenched. I had heard those words before. From a different mouth, in a different decade. But the melody was the same. "Do you want to go back?" I asked. She hesitated, bit her lip. "No," she whispered. "But I don't know how to leave. Not without ruining everything." I touched her shoulder gently, ruining what a house built on fear. She cried, quietly into the sleeve of her hoodie. Ivy slept in my arms. I felt the past curl around me like smoke. This was the moment. The moment my story began again, only I wasn't the victim this time. I was the witness, and the one holding the baby. Ethan called me the next morning. His voice was calm, cold. "I heard you talk to Dana." "Yes, you had no right." "I had every right." Long pause. "I'm her husband. She's emotional. She twists things. She's afraid of you. I've never laid a hand on her." "You don't have to, Charles." Silence. Then he said it, slowly, deliberately. "Don't call me that." I breathed through my nose, counted to 5. "What you call yourself doesn't change what you are." His voice dropped. "She's mine. The kids are mine. Don't meddle. Don't make this ugly. You made it ugly the first time you looked at her like she wasn't human." And then something slipped. For the first time in years, he raised his voice. "You think I'm him, don't you? You think I'm Tony?" The name hit the air like a thunderclap. I said nothing. "You're so desperate to rewrite your story, you're willing to lie about mine." "I'm not lying," I said. "I'm remembering." He hung up. A week later, Dana filed for separation. I helped her with the paperwork, found her an attorney, paid for the hotel, cooked meals for the kids. Every time Ivy giggled, I heard the echo of a girl I used to be. Every time Dana flinched at a sudden sound, I felt the bruises I'd long since buried. And every night I sat at my kitchen table, hands folded, wondering, where did I go wrong? What didn't I see? What didn't I stop? And the hardest question of all, is healing even possible when the pain grows into someone you love? One day, Dana handed me a drawing Ivy had made. It was a family picture, crayons and stick figures. There was Dana smiling, Ivy, her baby brother, and a tall man with a red face and no eyes. I pointed to the figure. "Who's this?" Ivy looked up serious. "That's the monster." I blinked. "Where's Grandma?" I asked. She picked up the yellow crayon and drew another stick figure, tiny next to the others, a figure with white hair and a big heart on her chest. "That's you," she said. "You come with light." And Jessica Smith broke down sobbing in the hallway. Because maybe I couldn't stop the cycle entirely. Maybe I couldn't erase what Ethan had become. But I could shine light on it, call it what it was, and protect the next child in line. It started with a letter, thick, official cream-colored paper tucked into a government envelope. My hands trembled as I pulled it out already, knowing what it was before I even read the first line. Ethan Smith is petitioning for temporary custody of Ivy and Lucas Smith minors, citing abandonment and mental instability of the mother Dana Smith. I felt like the floor beneath me had vanished. The boy I had nursed through croup, bandaged through scraped knees, and prayed for every night of his life, was now using the same justice system I once begged to protect me. Only this time he was the abuser, and I was the witness. Dana was in the kitchen feeding Lucas mashed bananas. When I showed her the letter, her hands went limp. The spoon clattered to the tile. I thought he said he didn't want them, she whispered. He doesn't, I said. He wants control. And suddenly, everything I thought I had left behind came roaring back. The courtroom, the shame, the confusion, the quiet disbelief on the faces of those who didn't understand how charm could be weaponized. I knew the game, I had played it, and I had lost once. Not this time. We hired a lawyer, a good one. Her name was Priscilla Hart, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with salt and pepper hair and a voice that could cut through steel. He'll try to paint himself as the stable parent she warned. Your job is to stay calm, stay factual, and document everything. Dana nodded, but I could see the fear behind her eyes. I can't do this, she whispered to me later that night. I'm not strong like you. I reached across the couch, took her hand. I wasn't strong either, I said. I was desperate. That's all strength is sometimes. She didn't respond, but the next day she filed her own affidavit. Line by line, bruise by bruise, she laid it out. The verbal threats, the isolation, the sleep deprivation, the subtle calculated terror. And I sat beside her through every word, through every tear, through every jagged silence. Because someone had to, because no one had for me. Then came the home visit. A court-appointed evaluator, clipboards, questions, quiet judgment and beige slacks. She walked through the apartment, glanced at the fridge covered in Ivy's drawings, the pile of toys in the living room, the stack of books I read aloud every night. Then she asked Dana, "Do you feel safe here?" Dana paused, looked at me, then back at the evaluator. I didn't before she said, but now I think I'm learning how. And that somehow was more powerful than any affidavit. The day of the hearing arrived. Ethan showed up in a gray suit, clean-shaven, with a pair of glasses I knew he didn't need. He smiled at the judge, thanked the bailiff, sat perfectly still beside his attorney like the very image of reason. Then his attorney spoke. She has no job, no income. She's living with an elderly woman with no legal guardianship of the children. Mr. Smith only wants to protect his kids from instability. The judge looked at Dana. "Do you have a formal guardian in the household?" I stood. "My name is Jessica Smith," I said. "I'm their grandmother." There was a pause. Ethan's eyes met mine across the courtroom. No warmth, no shame, just calculation. "You're his mother," the judge asked. "Yes," I said, "and I'd like to speak if I may." My lawyer hesitated, but I nodded at her. I needed to say it myself. I stepped forward, hands shaking. "Your Honor." I raised my son alone after fleeing an abusive marriage at 15. I did everything I could to build him into a man of kindness and strength. But somewhere along the line, something went wrong, and I didn't want to see it. I thought I could love it away. I thought I could mother it away, but I couldn't. There was a hush. I don't say this out of spite. I say this out of survival, because what Ethan does to Dana is what was once done to me. And if these children are returned to him, the cycle will continue. I paused. Tears welled in my eyes, but I held the judge's gaze. You can't always see bruises, but that doesn't mean they aren't there. The judge asked for a recess. When court resumed, Dana was granted temporary custody with supervised visitation rights for Ethan pending psychological evaluation. It wasn't a final victory, but it was a step away from silence, a step toward sunlight. Outside the courthouse, Ethan approached me. His voice was low, steady. "You're a liar," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm your mother, and that's what makes this hurt." He leaned closer. "You made me this way." "I made you a person," I said quietly. "What you chose to do with that is yours to own." He stared at me. For the first time, his eyes wavered, just for a second. Then he turned and walked away. That night, Ivy drew another picture. This time, there were 4 figures: Dana, Ivy, baby Lucas, and me. No monster, just us, holding hands, under a sun drawn in yellow crayon that stretched wide across the page. We taped it to the refrigerator. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night. No one prepares you for the morning that comes while your loved ones are still alive. It's a strange kind of grief, one that doesn't wear black or bring casseroles. There's no service, no condolences, no flowers. Just silence and long aching nights. That was what I lived with after the hearing. The court's decision was a victory for Dana and the children, a small, hard-won step toward safety. But inside me, there was a chasm wide and echoing with Ethan's name carved into the walls. I didn't miss the man he had become, but I grieved for the boy he used to be. The boy who once curled into my lap during thunderstorms. The boy who begged me to read the same bedtime story 3 times. The boy who asked if people could grow kindness like they grew teeth. He had been real. I hadn't imagined him. And now he was gone. I didn't speak this grief aloud. There was no room for it. Dana needed my steadiness. Ivy needed my laughter. Lucas needed my arms. So I cooked. I cleaned. I played peekaboo. I folded tiny socks and sang lullabies that once belonged to a boy who no longer called me mother. Each task stitched a bit of order into the chaos. But late at night, when the children slept and Dana stared blankly at a book she couldn't finish, I would walk to the back porch, sit on the steps, and let it out. Not sobs, just silence, tears that made no sound. Mourning a son who still breathed but had chosen another path, one that twisted him away from the light. Dana was trying. I saw it in the way she checked the locks twice each night, in the stack of job applications by the toaster, in the nervous smile she gave Ivy whenever the phone rang. One evening, as we folded laundry, she said softly, "Do you ever feel like you failed?" I looked at her. She wasn't accusing. She was aching. All the time, I said. She looked down at a tiny onesie in her hands. "But you didn't," I added. "You got out. You asked for help. That's not failure. That's the start of freedom." Her chin quivered. "You still love him, don't you?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, but I don't trust him, and I don't protect the person he's become." Dana folded the last shirt slowly. "I want to hate him, but sometimes I miss the good days. The days I thought were real." "They were real," I said, "just like the storms that followed." Grief and healing are twin rivers. They flow beside each other, sometimes intertwining, sometimes apart. That's what those days became, rivers we learned to wade through together. I taught Ivy how to bake biscuits, and she taught me how to draw purple suns with squiggly smiles. Dana got a part-time job at the flower shop downtown. The owner, Mrs. Whitley, was kind and firm, the kind of woman who saw through polite smiles and offered grace anyway. When Dana got her first paycheck, she framed the stub. "I know it's small," she said. "It's proof," I said. "Of what?" "That you are building something with your own hands." She smiled. It reached her eyes that time. Weeks turned to months. Ethan stopped calling. Stopped threatening. I'd like to believe it was remorse. But I knew better. He had moved on to other battles, other conquests. Control doesn't sleep. It just changes targets. Sometimes I wondered if he would ever come back, not for love, but to reclaim what he still believed was his. But each day that passed without his shadow felt like a fragile kind of peace. A seed of safety. One night, Dana came home with a letter. Handwritten, no return address. "It's from him," she said, holding it like a wound. I took it from her, read it silently. "Dana, I hope you're happy with what you've done. You turned my mother against me. You poisoned my kids. You'll regret this one day when they blame you for growing up without a father. I was never a monster. You just wanted a reason to run. You'll find out the hard way that no one else will ever love you like I did. No apology, no ownership, just poison dressed as prose." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a manila envelope marked "For the attorney." Dana sat down numb. "I shouldn't have opened it," she whispered. "No," I said, "but now you see." "See what?" "That monsters don't hide in shadows. They hide in plain sight. And when they can't scare you anymore, they write letters to remind you who they think you still are." She didn't cry this time. Instead, she reached over, held my hand and said, "Thank you for not letting me go back." And I held her back and whispered, "Thank you for not letting me give up." That night, as I tucked Ivy into bed, she looked up at me. "Grandma." "Yes, love. Will Daddy come back one day?" The question sliced clean through me. I didn't lie. "I don't know," I said gently, "but if he does, we'll make sure you're safe. Even if he's angry. Especially then." She blinked up at me, thoughtful. "Can I be strong like you when I'm big?" I kissed her forehead. "You already are." And in that moment, something shifted. Not in her. In me. I realized that every bruise I had hidden, every night I had endured in silence, every choice I thought was failure, had led to this little girl asking not how to love him again, but how to become strong herself. That was healing. That was redemption. It started with a photo, tucked between 2 pages of an old cookbook I hadn't touched in years. A black and white snapshot, edges yellowed and curling. 3 people stood in a yard. One of them was me, barely 5, clinging to my mother's skirt. She was young in that photo, but tired. Her smile was thin, her eyes even thinner. The man standing behind her had his hand on her shoulder. His face was in shadow, but I knew who he was. My father, a man I hadn't spoken of in 50 years, a name I hadn't said out loud in even longer. I stared at that picture for an hour, long after the kettle whistled, long after Ivy had gone down for her nap and Dana had left for work. And then I made a decision. I pulled out the old wooden chest from my bedroom closet, the one I'd carried from apartment to apartment through cities and decades, but never opened since the day I buried my mother. Inside were her letters, her journals, bits of a woman I had spent most of my life resenting and only recently began to wonder about. Because here's the thing I'd never allowed myself to ask before. Why didn't she leave? Why didn't she protect me? Why did she whisper run and then never follow? I sat at the kitchen table, the weight of her handwriting heavy in my hands. The first journal entry was dated 1958. She was 20, pregnant, and terrified. He says it's my fault when he drinks, that I talk too much, that I move wrong. Last night he broke the lamp and said it was because I looked at him the way his mother used to. I don't even know what that means. My stomach churned. This wasn't news. I had lived in that house, heard those fights, hid under that same broken lamp. But seeing her words made it feel real in a different way. Not just memory, but witness. I flipped forward. Jessica doesn't speak much. I think it's my fault. She flinches when he enters the room. I tried to hold her tighter last night, but he pulled her away and said I was turning her soft. Tears spilled onto the pages. She had seen it too. She hadn't been blind. She had just been trapped, like I once was, like Dana had been. The difference I got out, because of her. Because on one rainy Tuesday afternoon, as she lay bruised and silent in her chair, she grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Run." That single word saved my life. I had spent years resenting her for not coming with me. Now I saw it differently. She had stayed behind so I could get out. Later that night, I told Dana about the journals. She poured us tea and listened quietly. "Do you hate her still?" she asked. "No," I said slowly. "I think I misunderstood her strength." She nodded, understanding more than I expected. It's hard, isn't it, loving women who had to survive in silence? I looked at her. It's harder realizing we became them in some ways, until we didn't. We sat like that for a long time, 2 generations of scarred women trying to stitch meaning from the threads left behind. That weekend, I took Ivy to the park. As she climbed the slide, I watched a mother scolding her daughter nearby. Not abusive, just sharp, cold. And I saw the little girl shrink in on herself, look away, disappear into her own head. It broke something in me. Not because I judged the mother, but because I saw myself, my mother, Dana, all the women who had tried their best while drowning. When Ivy ran back to me, laughing, cheeks pink with sunshine, I pulled her into my lap. "Do you know what Grandma wants more than anything?" I asked. She looked up at me curious. "What?" "For you to grow up safe and strong and kind even when it's hard." She nodded solemnly, then added, "Can I still be silly too?" I laughed. "Please do, because maybe that was the greatest break in the cycle. Not just surviving, but choosing joy, choosing light, choosing more than what we were given." That night, I wrote a letter to my mother, not to send, just to say, "Mama, I forgive you. I see now you loved me the only way you could, that your silence wasn't weakness, it was a shield thin and cracking, but it held just long enough for me to slip through. I ran like you asked, and now I'm standing, watching over the little ones you never got to meet. Your great-grandchildren, they are safe, I promise. We're not just surviving anymore, Mama, we're healing. Love, Jessica." I folded the letter and tucked it into her journal, closed the book, and for the first time in decades, I felt her beside me. Not the ghost, not the pain, but the woman who once whispered run and meant it with her whole soul. It came once again in an envelope. Certified cold legal. Petition for shared custody. Ethan was back. After 8 months of silence, no visits, no birthday cards, not even a whisper he'd returned. Not with apology, not with remorse, but with paperwork. I thought he gave up. Dana said, her voice barely a breath. "No," I said. "People like him don't give up. They wait. They regroup." She opened the letter with shaking hands, each page like a fresh wound. He had a new attorney, a new address, a new fiancé. Dana blinked hard. She has 2 kids. He's calling them his daughters. The words were bitter in her mouth. I read through the claims, lies mostly, that Dana was unstable, that the children were being raised by an aging grandmother with no formal guardianship, that Ethan had changed, was in therapy, engaged, stable. The court date was in 6 weeks. We had to decide fight or fold, but folding wasn't an option, not anymore. Dana and I met with Priscilla again. She was quiet as she read the paperwork, then set it down. He's playing the long game, she said, trying to look rehabilitated. He thinks if he's consistent enough, he'll wear the system down. He doesn't even want them, Dana whispered. Why is he doing this? For control, I answered, because he lost it and now he wants to prove he can take it back. Priscilla nodded. We'll need statements, medical records, teacher reports. Anything that shows stability, safety, and continuity in the kids' lives? And if he drags us through court for years, Dana asked, then we stand, together, as long as it takes. Dana didn't cry this time. She just exhaled, a long, hard breath of someone who has survived too many storms to fear the clouds anymore. In the weeks that followed, we built our case. We met with Ivy's teacher, who wrote a glowing report on her progress, her behavior, her joy. She used to be so quiet, the teacher said. Now she laughs all the time. We collected photos, birthday cakes, family walks, finger paintings on the fridge. We gathered statements from neighbors who'd seen Dana pushing a stroller at 7 a.m. every morning, walking Lucas to the park. We even had a statement from Mrs. Whitley, her boss at the flower shop. Dana is dependable, warm, and hardworking. If I had 3 of her, I could run this town. Ethan, of course, wasn't silent. He posted smiling photos with his new fiancée and her daughters. He tagged locations, showed off parenting books, wrote captions about blended families and second chances. It was a performance, a carefully curated campaign. He called Dana twice, left voicemails. One was chilling. You always knew they were mine, Dana. They'll come home eventually. I don't lose. I saved the message, sent it to the lawyer, because now every word was evidence. Every breath he took an admission of control. The night before the hearing, I found Dana in Ivy's room, sitting on the floor, folding a tiny pink dress. She outgrew this, she said, voice low. It used to be her favorite. She smoothed the fabric like a wound she couldn't close. I keep thinking, what if he wins? I sat beside her. We show the court who he is, and we show them who we are. And if they don't believe us, then we appeal and we keep standing. She looked at me, eyes red but steady. Do you ever get tired of being strong? All the time, I whispered, but I never get tired of protecting the people I love. She nodded, and we sat there side by side, not as mother and daughter-in-law, but as survivors, as protectors, as women who refused to be erased. The courtroom was colder this time, more clinical, less dramatic. Ethan sat beside his attorney, his fiancée behind him. She was young, pretty, polished. She held her breath the whole time. Dana spoke first, calm, clear, steady. She described her daily routines, her work, the kids' school, their friends, their bedtime rituals. She ended with one line I will never forget. I'm not trying to erase their father. I'm trying to protect their childhood. Then it was my turn. I told the judge about the late-night cries, the old bruises, the letter Ethan sent, the voicemail. But more than that, I told him about Ivy's laugh, Lucas's first steps, Dana's framed paycheck, Ivy's purple suns. You asked for proof of stability, Your Honor, I said. This is it. A home built not with wealth, but with healing. Ethan's turn came. His voice was sweet, polished, regretful. He spoke of change, of therapy, of how much he missed his kids. But when the judge asked why he hadn't visited for 8 months, he stumbled. I was giving Dana space, letting her calm down. The judge pressed, and now you want custody. I want what's best for them. Even if that means disrupting the only stability they've known in a year, silence. And for the first time, I saw it crack. The charm, the performance. His mask faltered. He looked like a man who realized he might actually lose. The ruling came a week later. Full custody to Dana, no visitation unless court-supervised and approved by a family psychologist. Restraining orders for harassment and emotional intimidation. The paper was clean, plain. But to us it was freedom. It was fire. It was closure. Dana held it like a medal, not of victory, but of survival. Later that night, I watched her tuck Ivy into bed. She knelt beside her and whispered something I couldn't hear. Ivy smiled, pulled her close. When Dana came out, she looked at me. You did it, she said. No, I said, we did. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying someone else's story. I was writing mine. It arrived on a Tuesday, in a plain white envelope. No return address, just my name written in elegant cursive I didn't recognize. I almost threw it out, but something intuition, curiosity, dread made me open it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, handwritten, neat, controlled. The kind of writing that hides emotion behind perfect strokes. Dear Mrs. Smith, you don't know me, but I've come to know you more than you realize. My name is Ava. Was Ethan's fiancé? I'm writing because I've seen the other side now, the side you and Dana have lived through. And I need to say, I'm sorry. He wasn't always cruel. That's how it begins, right? He was charming, attentive. He made me feel seen. But it changed, slowly, in small ways. First it was my clothes, then my friends, then how I spoke to his daughters, then how I breathed. I thought I could fix it, love him enough to change him, but you can't patch a broken foundation with hope. A few nights ago, he got angry over a spilled cup of juice. His voice, it changed, and the girls, my girls, they froze, like they'd seen that monster before. Because they had. So I packed a bag, took my daughters, and left. He doesn't know where we are, and I won't tell him. But I found your address. I had to, because someone needs to tell you you were right. You weren't exaggerating. You weren't bitter. You were protecting your family. Thank you for fighting, for Dana, for Ivy, for Lucas. You may have saved more lives than you'll ever know. Please don't feel obligated to write back. I just needed you to hear it. With deepest respect, Ava. I sat at the kitchen table, letter in hand, heart thudding. This wasn't justice, not quite. But it was something else. Validation, witness, proof that the cycle had tried to replicate and failed. Because someone recognized the warning signs early enough to run. Not everyone gets that chance. That evening, I shared the letter with Dana. She read it in silence. When she finished, her eyes were glassy. She got out, she whispered. She saw it. Yes, Dana pressed the page to her chest. I hope she knows she's not alone. She will, I said. She just joined the long line of women who've survived him. And for the first time, Dana didn't look haunted. She looked powerful, like a woman reclaiming her name one layer at a time. Later, I sat on the porch and thought about writing Ava back. But what would I say? That I admired her courage, that I wished her peace, that I was proud of a stranger for choosing safety over silence? Yes, all of it. So I wrote, Dear Ava, thank you for your honesty, for your bravery, for breaking the chain before it wrapped itself too tightly around your life. You are not the first woman to love a broken man, but you might be one of the few who turned away before becoming broken too. I see you, I believe you, and I am proud of you. You are not alone, Jessica Smith. I mailed it the next day, and though I wasn't sure if it would reach her, I knew it would matter. Because sometimes healing begins in silence, but it blossoms in acknowledgement. In the days that followed, a quiet settled into our home. Not fear, not tension, but peace. Lucas learned how to say mama and no in the same breath. Ivy began asking questions about planets and stars. Dana started drawing again, filling sketchbooks with soft, vivid landscapes, places she wanted to visit one day. And me? I began sleeping through the night. No locked doors, no phone under my pillow, just sleep. Honest, dreamless, sacred sleep. One morning, Ivy came into the kitchen with a question. Grandma, who made you brave? The question startled me. I opened my mouth to say your mother or my mother or even no one, I just had to be. But instead I said pain. She tilted her head unsure. So I knelt beside her and clarified. Pain taught me bravery, but love made it worth learning. She smiled small and sweet, and for a moment the world felt whole. I wake up before the sun now. Not because of nightmares, not from anxiety, but from habit. A quiet kind, a rhythm earned over decades of holding lives together before they shattered. At 73 mornings are sacred. They carry no urgency, only meaning. Today, I sit at the table with my tea, a pen, and the last blank page of the notebook I've been filling since Ethan left. This notebook isn't for lawyers or counselors. It's for Ivy, and for the granddaughter she might have one day, and maybe for the woman she will become, curious, bruised, brilliant. A woman who might one day wonder, where do I come from? My sweet Ivy, if you're reading this, you've grown old enough to carry questions, and maybe even burdens. I hope this helps you carry them with your chin high and your heart intact. You come from a line of women who survived, not just storms but floods, not just heartbreak but soul-fracturing betrayals. Your great-grandmother stayed in an abusive marriage so I could get out. I left that same pattern so your mother could build a home that didn't hurt. And your mother, she chose you. Every day, even when it terrified her. So when you feel the ache of generational pain, know this. You are the first in our line who got to grow up safe, happy, whole. That didn't happen by chance. It happened because every woman before you held the line a little longer than she should have, until she couldn't. And then she ran. We didn't win awards for it. We weren't thanked for it, but we broke the pattern. And you, my darling, are what healing looks like. You are the house we were all trying to build. Not made of wood or brick, but of softness, safety, joy. Live well in that house, and never be afraid to renovate it when the time comes. All my love, Grandma Jessica. I put down the pen and let the silence wrap around me, not as a punishment, but as peace. For years, silence meant secrets, shame, fear. But now it means freedom. It means no more screaming, no more locked doors, no more pretending. It means morning birds, the clink of a spoon in a teacup, the creak of floorboards under small feet chasing breakfast. Dana comes into the kitchen, hair messy, cheeks flushed. Ivy wants waffles, she grins, but only if they're shaped like stars. I think that can be arranged, I smile. Lucas babbles from the hallway, dragging a teddy bear twice his size. It's chaotic, beautiful, loud in a way that feels safe. And I realize something. This house, the one we've made together, it was never about escaping pain. It was about transforming it. Brick by brick, page by page, choice by choice. From terror to tenderness, from legacy to liberation. A few days later, I get a call. It's Ava. She's doing well, working again. Her daughters are in school. She's thinking of starting a support group. Do you think anyone would come? She asks. I laugh softly. They'll line up Ava. We've all been waiting for someone to say it out loud. Say what? That abuse doesn't always look like bruises. That love isn't supposed to feel like debt. That healing is loud, messy, and worth it. She thanks me again before we hang up. And I feel it, that quiet click in my chest. Closure. Not because justice was served on a silver platter, but because we built something better than revenge. We built a new story. In the fall, I plant daffodils in the backyard with Ivy. Why flowers, she asks, because they bloom even after the coldest winters? She tilts her head thoughtful, like us. I pause touched. Yes, sweet girl, just like us. The seasons pass. Lucas learns to walk, then run. Ivy starts second grade and writes an essay titled, Why My Grandma is My Hero. Dana paints again, this time a field of wildflowers bursting through concrete. She calls it Reclaimed. I hang it in the hallway. And every time I pass it, I remember the woman I used to be didn't vanish. She evolved. She walked through fire. She carried generations on her back. She told the truth even when it cost her everything. And in the end, she lived long enough to see the curse break. This is my story. Not the one they tried to write for me. Not the one my father scripted in fists. Not the one Ethan tried to reenact. Mine. And if you've read this far, maybe it's yours too. Maybe you've survived something no one clapped for. Maybe you broke a cycle no one saw. Maybe you whispered run to yourself and finally did. If so, welcome. You are not broken. You are the blueprint. You are the house rebuilt from ash and the soft bed that future generations will sleep in safely. You are the end of the story we feared and the beginning of one we never dreamed possible. So live it. Loudly, kindly, unapologetically. The curse ends here, and the healing, it begins with you.